Parents gave my sister $400,000 for her wedding as a gift, offered to pay for mine but then sent me an invoice 2 days later. So I paid and cut contact, but my sister is screaming at my door. I never had the best relationship with my parents, but it wasn't terrible either. They were always more partial towards my sister, Sarah, but I learned to live with it. Sarah, now 32, was always the golden child, and I, at 28, was used to being in her shadow. Growing up, she got the newest phones, better clothes, and more attention, while I made do with hand-me-downs and worked part-time jobs since I was 16 to afford the things I wanted. I didn't complain much. I understood that my parents weren't obligated to provide anything beyond the basics, plus I took pride in being independent. The real shock came when Sarah got married 3 years ago. My parents gave her and her husband a whopping $400,000 as a wedding gift, which they used to buy a beautiful house in an upscale neighborhood. At the time, I was genuinely happy for her, even if it stung a little. I had my own life going on. I was doing well as a software engineer, had saved up a decent amount of money, and was dating Tom, who would later become my husband. I figured my time would come, and I didn't dwell on the fact that my parents had never given me anything close to what they gave Sarah. After all, I didn't expect it. Fast forward to last year when Tom proposed, I was over the moon. We had been together for years, and he was everything I had hoped for in a partner. We planned a modest wedding, nothing too extra because we wanted to save for the future. Neither of us wanted to blow all our savings on a single day, even if it was important. We had budgeted around $36,000, which felt reasonable for the kind of wedding we wanted, elegant but not over the top. To my surprise, my parents offered to pay for the entire wedding. I was touched. It felt like, for once, they were recognizing me as equally important. They seemed enthusiastic, asking about venues and vendors, and they genuinely appeared to be interested in helping. I didn't think too much about the amount. I figured they had already done so much for Sarah, so maybe they wanted to do something for me too. I never expected them to contribute anywhere near what they gave Sarah, but their offer to cover the wedding seemed generous. The wedding day was perfect. We had a small, intimate ceremony with close family and friends, exactly the way we wanted it. My parents gave speeches, danced with us, and seemed genuinely happy. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally being treated equally, like they were proud of me. Tom and I planned to leave for our honeymoon the following week, but we had a few work commitments to wrap up before we left. Then, 2 days after the wedding, I received an email from my father. It wasn't a sweet note or leftover wedding gift card like I had imagined. Instead, it was an itemized invoice attached as a PDF, listing every single expense they had paid for the wedding. The email was short and cold. Please settle this at your earliest convenience. Your mother and I expect prompt payment. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The invoice totaled $35,463.89, down to the last flower arrangement and appetizer. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Tom found me sitting there, frozen, and when I showed him the email, he was livid. It wasn't about the money, we could afford it if we needed to. But that wasn't the point. My parents had offered to pay for the wedding. I hadn't asked them to cover a single thing. They had come to me, offered it as a gift, and even seemed excited to be part of the planning process. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. This wasn't just about the money, it was about years of being treated as less than Sarah. When she got married, they gave her $400,000 as a gift, no strings attached. They never asked her to pay back a single cent. And now, they were essentially billing me for my wedding, treating it like a loan. It felt like all the emotional baggage from years of favoritism had finally culminated in this one cruel act. The next morning, after a long, sleepless night of going over everything with Tom, I made a decision. I wrote my parents a check for the full amount, but I also sent them a letter. I didn't want to confront them directly because I knew I wouldn't be able to keep my emotions in check, and I didn't want this to turn into a screaming match. In the letter, I explained how hurt I was. I reminded them that I had been independent since I was 16, paying my own way while watching them give everything to Sarah. I wrote that when they offered to pay for the wedding, I had mistakenly believed that they were finally treating me with the same love and care they had always given my sister. Instead, they had blindsided me. I didn't hold back. I told them that all this time, I had let a lot of stuff slide and never said a single word about how differently they treated Sarah and me, but what I couldn't accept was this cruel bait and switch. They had made me believe they were giving me a gift, only to turn around and demand repayment as though I were some stranger, not their daughter. I also wrote that this would be the last financial interaction we would ever have. From that point on, I would decline any future offers of help, support, or gifts from them, and I made it clear that I wanted nothing from them in the future, not even an inheritance. I told them they could give it all to Sarah, as they had done with everything else. I sent the check and letter by mail and blocked their numbers. I needed space. Tom supported my decision, and I felt a sense of relief after mailing everything. But then, they went radio silent. For days, I heard nothing from them, which only fueled the fire for me. Then, the messages from extended family started pouring in. Distant aunts, uncles, and family friends began calling and texting, accusing me of being ungrateful and dramatic. They said my parents had done so much for me and that I was blowing things out of proportion. Sarah called me too, yelling about how I was tearing the family apart. She said that I should have just paid the invoice without making a fuss. It was typical Sarah always taking their side. And why wouldn't she? I haven't responded to any of them. I don't know what to say. On one hand, I feel justified in my actions. After years of being treated as second best, this felt like the last straw, and I wanted to stand up for myself. But on the other hand, I keep wondering if I'm overreacting. Am I being too sensitive? Was it unreasonable of me to expect that they would treat my wedding as a gift like they did with Sarah? Should I have just sucked it up, paid the invoice, and moved on? Tom's family has been incredibly supportive through all of this. His parents were horrified when they heard what my parents had done, and they'd been checking in on us every day. But the constant messages from my side of the family are starting to wear me down. I'm questioning whether I made the right decision. Did I handle this the wrong way? Should I have tried to talk to my parents before cutting them off? Or was I right to finally draw a line after years of feeling like I wasn't as valued as Sarah? Now I am truly stuck, and I am not sure if I'm the one in the wrong. Part of me feels like I had every right to be upset and stand up for myself, but another part of me wonders if I've just created an irreparable rift in my family. Maybe I should have handled things differently. Do you guys have any insights? Update 1. Since my last post, things have taken a turn for the worse. I had no idea the simple act of sending that check and letter would set off such a chain reaction, but here we are. Yesterday morning, I woke up to an email from my mother. It slipped through because she used her work email, which I hadn't blocked yet. The email was long and self-righteous. In it, she explained that the invoice they sent me wasn't meant to be taken seriously. According to her, they never actually intended to cash the check. The whole thing, she claimed, was a life lesson about financial responsibility. They had wanted to test my reaction, and once they felt I had learned my lesson, they were planning to tear up the check and surprise me with a gift of $100,000 as a real wedding gift. I couldn't believe what I was reading. A life lesson? What kind of parents trick their adult daughter like this? After reading that, it became even more clear that it wasn't about love or fairness, it was about control. They wanted to see if I would push back or blindly comply. It felt manipulative and cruel. Without hesitation, I mobile deposited the check. There was no way I was letting them tear it up after this lesson. I wanted the check cashed, and I wanted them to feel the weight of their actions. Then, in response to my mother's email, I sent her a short reply. I kept it simple and direct. Thank you for confirming that this was, indeed, a deliberate test rather than a misunderstanding. After sending it, I blocked her work email too. I knew there would be more attempts to contact me, and I wasn't interested in any more games or so-called lessons. Later that evening, things escalated further. Sarah showed up at my apartment unannounced. She started knocking loudly on my door, yelling my name. I didn't answer at first, hoping she would give up and leave, but that didn't happen. Instead, she started shouting through the door, saying I was being childish and making this whole situation bigger than it needed to be. She said our parents were just trying to teach me responsibility because they were worried about my spending habits. That comment, coming from Sarah of all people, made my blood boil. This was the same woman who had never paid for her own phone bill, never worked a day in her life without my parents' support, and yet she had the audacity to lecture me about financial responsibility? As she ranted on, I quietly started recording everything on my phone. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but I wanted to have proof in case this turned into something even messier. Sarah went on and on about how I was tearing the family apart over something so trivial, and that I should just apologize to our parents and move on. She said they never meant to hurt me and that they had always done their best for both of us. She kept insisting that I was overreacting and that this entire situation was my fault. I didn't respond. I didn't open the door. I just sat there listening, silently fuming. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, she left, but not before calling me selfish and accusing me of trying to cut ties with the family over money. Once she was gone, I sat in silence for a while, feeling the weight of everything. Sarah's outburst only confirmed what I had already known for years: she would always take their side, no matter how unreasonable or hurtful their actions were. That night, I received more messages from extended family members. Apparently, Sarah had gone straight to my parents after her failed attempt at talking to me, and now they were rallying the troops. My phone was flooded with texts from aunts, uncles, and even a few family friends. Most of the messages follow the same pattern, calling me ungrateful, accusing me of causing unnecessary drama, and urging me to apologize to my parents for how I had treated them. One message in particular stuck out to me. It was from an aunt I hadn't heard from in years. He told me that I was lucky to have parents who cared enough to teach me these lessons, and that I should be grateful they were willing to spend so much on my wedding at all. She ended the message by saying that I was lucky to even have parents who wanted to be involved in my life. I couldn't believe how quickly everyone had turned on me. It was like they had all decided that my parents were in the right simply because they were the ones with the money and power. No one seemed to care about the emotional manipulation or the years of favoritism that had led up to this point. All they saw was that I was rejecting my parents' supposed generosity, and that was enough for them to side against me. By this point, Tom was starting to worry about how much this was affecting me. He kept asking if I wanted to take a break from social media and turn off my phone for a while, just to give myself some peace. He tried to reassure me that I wasn't in the wrong. He reminded me of all the times my parents had shown favoritism towards Sarah, and how they had always used money as a tool to manipulate both of us. The most frustrating part was that I couldn't get any real answers. My parents weren't reaching out to explain themselves any further. They truly believed in their own narrative, painting themselves as the misunderstood parents who were just trying to help, while I was the ungrateful daughter who had blown everything out of proportion. I started to wonder if I should have handled things differently. Maybe instead of sending that letter and blocking them, I should have sat down with them and had a real conversation. But then again, I knew how those conversations usually went. They would twist everything around until I was the one apologizing for feeling hurt in the first place. It was a cycle I had been stuck in for years, and I wasn't sure if I had the energy to go through it again. Anyways, for now, I'm trying to focus on the life Tom and I are building together. We can't do much now and just hope for things to get better, I guess. Update 2. Hey everyone, I wanted to start by thanking all of you for your responses. Reading through your comments, advice, and personal stories really helped me process what has been happening. It's been a whirlwind of emotions over the past few days, and your support has meant more than you could know. While I've tried to stay strong through this, things have taken yet another unexpected turn. A few days after Sarah's visit, I received a call from my father's brother, my uncle. I hadn't spoken to him in years, and honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect. He's never been close to the family, but I figured he was reaching out to tell me to make amends with my parents like everyone else had been doing. Instead, what he told me blew my mind and put everything into perspective in a way I hadn't seen before. He started by saying he had heard what was going on through the family grapevine, and he felt compelled to reach out because, apparently, this wasn't the first time my parents had pulled a stunt like this. 20 years ago, something similar had happened between him and my grandparents, my father's parents. My uncle had refused to go along with their manipulative tactics, and as a result, they smeared his name throughout the family, accusing him of trying to steal from them and being ungrateful for everything they had done for him. He explained that back then, my dad didn't support him. In fact, he sided with their parents, which led to a huge rift between the two brothers that had never fully healed. My uncle said that he had always felt abandoned by my dad, and it had taken him years to come to terms with how their family operated. Hearing him speak about the past was like listening to my own story but in a different context. My grandparents had used money and manipulation to control my uncle, just like my parents were trying to do with me now. The more he spoke, the more it all started to make sense. My parents weren't just acting out of character, they were repeating a pattern that had been set long before I was even born. They had learned this behavior from their own parents, and my dad, having been complicit in his brother's situation all those years ago, was now playing the same role as me. My uncle also mentioned that his refusal to comply with my grandparents' demands came with severe consequences. After the falling out, my grandparents cut him off completely, both financially and emotionally. They painted him as the black sheep of the family, and to this day, there are relatives who still believe the lies my grandparents spread about him. It was all about control, he said, and when they couldn't control him anymore, they erased him from their lives. Listening to my uncle's story sent chills down my spine. It was like a mirror image of what was happening to me now. My parents were upset because I had refused to play along with their game, and instead of trying to understand my perspective, they had turned the entire family against me. I started to see just how deep this toxic cycle ran, and how entrenched my parents were in the belief that they could control their children through manipulation. After my conversation with my uncle, I couldn't stop thinking about everything he had said. It made me wonder if, deep down, my father's behavior was driven by guilt. Maybe he knew he had abandoned his brother all those years ago, and now he was trying to justify his actions by doubling down on the same tactics. My parents had built their entire relationship with Sarah and me around the idea that we owed them something, and any deviation from that script was seen as betrayal. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that this wasn't about me at all. It was about them, their unresolved issues, and the unhealthy dynamics they had learned from their own parents. In the days that followed, I kept receiving more messages from family members. It was clear that Sarah had been working overtime to rally people against me. One of my cousins, whom I had always been close to, sent me a long text saying that I was being selfish and disrespectful for not appreciating everything my parents had done for me. She said that it wasn't too late to fix things, but I needed to humble myself and apologize before it was too late. Her message was filled with the same rhetoric that everyone else had been using, and it was exhausting to read. I realized that I had been raised in a family where love was conditional. Everything came with strings attached, whether it was financial help, emotional support, or even something as simple as celebrating a life event like a wedding. And now that I had refused to play by their rules, I was being cut off and isolated, just like my uncle had been. Tom has been my rock through all of this. After my uncle's call, we sat down and had a long talk about the future. He told me that no matter what happens, we'll get through this together, and that I don't owe anyone anything, not my parents, not Sarah, and certainly not the extended family members who had suddenly become armchair psychologists. His support has been unwavering, and for that, I'm grateful beyond words. But even with Tom by my side, I am still a little conflicted. My parents had done a number on me emotionally, and part of me still wondered if I was in the wrong. Was there a way to fix things without compromising my boundaries? I spent hours going back and forth in my head, trying to figure out if there was a path to reconciliation that didn't involve me sacrificing my own mental health. Then, something strange happened. I received a voicemail from my dad. It was the first time he had tried to reach out directly since I had sent the letter and check. His voice sounded different. He didn't sound angry or demanding like I had expected. Instead, he sounded tired. In the message, he said he didn't want to fight anymore and that he was willing to talk if I was open to it. He didn't apologize or acknowledge what had happened, but it was clear that something had shifted. Maybe he was starting to realize that I wasn't going to back down this time. I haven't responded yet. Part of me wants to call him back and see if there's a chance we can have an honest conversation about everything. But another part of me knows that this could just be another attempt to manipulate me into feeling guilty. My uncle's words keep ringing in my ears. They'll never admit they're wrong because they don't think they are. If I do decide to talk to my dad, I need to be prepared for the possibility that nothing will change. Right now, I'm still processing everything. The revelations from my uncle, the messages from family, my dad's voicemail, it's all going on in my head, and I'm not sure what my next step will be. I want to believe that my parents can change, that they can finally see me as an equal and not just someone they can control. But I also know that after years of being treated like this, it's going to take more than a single conversation to repair the damage. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. Tom and I have been focusing on our lives and our future together, trying to build something healthy and free from the toxic patterns of our families. But the doubt still lingers. Am I doing the right thing by standing my ground? Or am I pushing away the only family I've ever known? As much as I want to have a clear answer, I'm still in the same old boat. And maybe that's okay. I'll keep you all updated as things progress, but for now, I'm just trying to navigate this as best as I can. Update 3. Hi everyone, I want to start by saying how grateful I am for all of your responses. Your advice and support have been invaluable as I navigate this mess with my family. When I first posted, I wasn't sure where things were headed or what I wanted to do, but after reading through your comments and giving it a lot of thought, I've come to some important realizations. One thing that really stood out to me from your responses was how many of you pointed out that, for a long time, I've been forcing myself to make things good with my mom and dad, trying to patch things up and pretend like everything was normal. But the truth is, I've finally accepted that it's okay if things don't go back to normal because, honestly, I'm not even sure what normal was. The dynamic with my parents has always been unhealthy, and I've spent years trying to ignore that. Now, I realize that it's okay to let go of the idea that things will ever be the way I want them to be. A lot of you also pointed out that I might have been too forgiving in my assumptions about my dad's guilt. Looking back, I see that I was holding on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, my dad's behavior was driven by guilt and that he could change. You were right, it doesn't justify his actions, and it doesn't excuse the years of manipulation, favoritism, and emotional control. No matter how guilty he might feel, it doesn't erase the harm that's been done, and it doesn't mean I have to let him off the hook for it. But at the same time, I realize that I do need closure. I need to put an end to this chapter of my life, whether or not it involves reconciliation with my parents. So, I decided to meet my dad. I felt like it was something I had to do to get closure for myself, not for them. When I met my dad, I could tell right away that he wasn't the same person I had grown up fearing. He seemed worn down, almost defeated, and for the first time in my life, He actually seemed apologetic. He didn't come out and say, "I'm sorry" in those exact words, but he apologized for how things had gone with the wedding and for how both my mom and Sarah had treated me. He even mentioned that he had spoken to some of our relatives and asked them to stop bothering me, which was a small relief. But then, he did something that caught me off guard. He tried to return the money. He pulled out the same check I had sent him for the wedding expenses and slid it across the table toward me, asking me to take it back. He said that he and my mom had discussed it and that they wanted to make things right. But this time, I was prepared. I told him, as clearly as I could, that I wasn't taking the money back. I made it clear that this wasn't just about the money, it was about everything that had happened over the years, the way I had always been treated as second best, and the emotional toll that had taken on me. I told him that taking the money back wouldn't fix that and that this wasn't about a financial transaction anymore. I could see his frustration when I refused the money. It was as if he didn't know what else to offer me. I think, in his mind, returning the money was his way of saying sorry, but it didn't address the deeper issues that had been festering for years. He couldn't see that the damage wasn't something that could be undone with a check. After I told him I wasn't taking the money, he sat quietly for a few minutes before saying that he didn't want to lose me. He said he knew that things had gone too far, and he didn't want our family to be torn apart. I could tell he was trying to be sincere, but even in that moment, I realized that I wasn't looking for reconciliation. Not in the way he wanted, anyway. I wasn't interested in going back to the way things were or pretending like everything could magically be okay again. What I needed was space, a real break from the toxic dynamic that had defined our relationship for so long. So, I told him that I needed a break from the family and that this meeting, while it was important, didn't change much. I explained that I wasn't ready to just forgive and forget and that I needed time to heal on my own terms. He didn't argue with me, which surprised me. He just nodded and said he understood. He didn't try to convince me to come back or tell me I was overreacting like he had in the past. In some ways, that was more of an apology than anything else he could have said. As I left the meeting, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I wasn't angry, but I wasn't relieved either. I think I had gone into it hoping for some kind of closure, but closure isn't as neat and tidy as we want it to be. There wasn't a clear resolution, no dramatic reconciliation or emotional breakthrough. It was just, done. I had said what I needed to say, and now it was up to me to move forward. Since then, I've taken a few steps to protect my peace. I've blocked a few more family members who were still harassing me about the situation, and Tom and I have been focusing on building our life together without the constant stress of family drama. It's been nice to finally have some breathing room, but there's still a part of me that feels conflicted. I know I made the right decision by standing up for myself, but that doesn't mean it's easy. There are days when I wonder if I could have handled things differently, or if I should have given my parents another chance. But then I remember all the years of feeling like I wasn't enough, and I remind myself that I deserve better. Sarah, predictably, hasn't reached out to me since the meeting with my dad. I suspect she's still upset about the fallout, but at this point, I'm not interested in trying to fix things with her either. She's made it clear where her loyalties lie, and I've accepted that our relationship will never be what it could have been. I'm okay with that now. Letting go of the fantasy that we could ever be close has been painful, but it's also been freeing. As for my dad, I don't know what the future holds. He seemed genuinely sorry for what had happened, but I'm not sure if that's enough to rebuild a relationship. For now, I'm going to continue focusing on myself and my happiness. If there's one thing I've taken away from this whole experience, it's that I deserve to put myself first for once, and I'm going to do exactly that. So, I guess that's where things stand right now. It's not the happy ending I might have hoped for, but it's the ending I needed. And sometimes, that's enough. Thank you again to everyone who has been following along and offering support. I appreciate it more than I can say.